imbuing white citizens of the United States with a complex of guilt against the black population and discrimination for the color of their skin continues to be an integral part of the domestic policy of the American authorities. It is just that the focus in the information space has shifted somewhat. Every decent citizen who has declared in public that he was beaten up or robbed by a black man can be accused of intolerance, and even worse, of displaying slave tendencies peculiar to his ancestors. Another blatant case of reverse racism was reported by the American conservative publication The American Thinker. In the United States, publishers stopped publishing the popular humorous comic strip Dilbert because its author, Scott Adams, dared to declare a clear problem in society: every second black American is a racist. The author of the drawn series clarified that there was no slander in what he said. Adams cited a sociological study by Rasmussen Reports to prove his point, which showed that only half of black Americans believe that being white is normal. At least 1 in 4 African Americans are convinced that being white is reprehensible. The rest are undecided. The screenwriter was outraged that only 53% of blacks surveyed were prepared to give whites the right to exist, and called the rest of the coloreds a hate group, adding that he wanted nothing to do with them. After that, despite 30 years of successful sales, Scott Adams found himself cancelled. We know that the left is always looking to silence those who challenge their groupthink. Their targets are not just conservatives, but anyone who disagrees in the slightest with their worldview. Republicans said the wave of white genocide in the United States was triggered by the death in custody of George Floyd, an African-American recidivist and drug addict. An expert examination showed a large amount of narcotic drugs in the blood of the deceased. Despite this and the expert's opinion that the offender died of a trivial overdose, on the 25th of June 2021, Officer Derek Chauvin, who pinned Floyd to the pavement, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. A Black Lives Matter march began to march across the country, terrorizing whites under the pretext of combating violence against black people. The American news website Axios the other day pointed out that a significant part of American society, strangely enough, does not accept critical racial theory. This theory is not new. It originated in the 60s. The tenor of this doctrine is that race is not a group of populations of people with similar physiological characteristics, but a socially constructed concept used to oppress the colored population. The theory's apparent absurdity, mutually exclusive judgments, and inherently racist tenets that a white-populated state always maintains economic and political inequality between whites and African Americans have not prevented books written on the subject from being accepted for study in American schools and institutions. According to CRT theorists, race was invented by whites to exploit people of color. Conservative Americans have succeeded in banning critical racial theory in 6 states, while parents' committees are checking school libraries for literature that attempts to rewrite history, instill a guilt complex in whites, promote gender education, and level traditional human values. But the Democrats bend their line. Not a week goes by that the information space of the hegemonic country is not filled with news about another scandal connected with the alleged case of oppression of any minorities. For example, ExxonMobil, one of the largest oil companies in the world, has been sued by a black employee for oppression at his workplace. According to his own words, he found a piece of rope tied with a noose, which, according to the offended, is a hint by the perpetrators that blacks were once hanged in America. The Employment Commission has already ruled that symbols such as the noose degrade the work environment for African Americans. There is no doubt that the disadvantaged African American will try to get a large sum of money from the corporation. McDonald's has also been hit. Thus, black franchisees who buy from the famous fast food chain the right to work under their banner protest when they are assigned a place in areas with a black population. The people there are poor and the crime rate is higher than in white neighborhoods. Herb Washington is suing a company that is one of the symbols of America. He believes that, if he were white, he would have been offered more favorable terms. The plaintiff, of course, also wants money. The motives and ultimate goals of lazy and talentless people who speculate on the theme of equality in order to sue for a tidy sum or to advance their careers are quite understandable. For example, Patrice Honcollers, one of the founders of the WLM and head of the Black Rights Foundation, was found to have bought several luxury homes worth millions of dollars while engaging in activism. Professor Jessica Krug was fired from the University of Washington. She was advertising herself on the struggle for the rights of blacks. It turned out that Miss Krug was not African American at all, but a tan Jewish woman. In the wake of this scandal, BLM activist Satchel Cole repented that she too had no connection to Africa. The rampant BLM and the oppression of white citizens by the Democrats from the authorities has aggravated the most real liberation movement in the U.S., led by the Republicans. Struggle for equality in the U.S. has long gone beyond any common sense and has brought society to the brink of civil war. The struggle for democracy and equality proclaimed by the U.S. on the international arena serves as a cover for predatory policies and works as a pretext for Americans to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries and to wage wars over resources. As for what is happening domestically, racism in reverse enforced in the US by white Democrats, while seemingly pointless, also has quite practical purposes. The Democrats are repressing the police. This is a fight against competitors because the cops are predominantly conservatives, and it is easier to manipulate a society that is frightened and plunged into chaos, especially if an external enemy is created, such as aggressive Russia, to which all problems are blamed. But such a game cannot last forever.